Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is George Kriza, CEO of Challenging Decisions. Today we have a very knowledgeable and interesting guest for our video podcast, and that's Margaret Graziano. Margaret and I have known each other for over 20 years. Margaret operates a business designed to maximize corporate performance and do that in various different ways, including culture. And that'll be our main topic today, but we'd like to welcome Margaret. So say hello, Margaret.
Hi, George, and all the guests. Glad to be here.
All right, sounds good. I thought what would be nice, though, is before we get into the meat of the discussion, maybe you could give us a little bit of your career path and how you got here. I know we met 20 years ago. You were operating your organization out of Rolling Meadows, Illinois. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? And it's been maybe a bit of the long and winding road to get here. So we'd love to hear about it.
So I started my career in recruiting. And when I met George, we were both members of something called Tech, which is now Vistage. And I was running a search and a staffing company. And somewhere around 2008, I decided it was time to do something for me that was more meaningful. And I sold that business and I transitioned to organizational culture. Along the journey, as I was running the staffing and recruiting company, I also took organizational development classes. I went back to DePaul and I got a certification in organizational development, specifically in diagnosis, how to find out if something's wrong with an organization or where it's wrong or what is the root cause. And then I went into behavioral psychometrics and then a whole host of a decade of work in the human potential movement. So the company now, Keen Alignment, is an intersection between organizational effectiveness and human potential. And it really is what we do is we work with leadership teams to optimize the people on the team, remove constraints so they can accomplish their goals.
Sounds terrific. And that's without a doubt a very, very important part of business success today. And I'd like to maybe start the discussion by asking you what seems to me kind of an obvious question, but maybe it's not so obvious. Who would you say owns the culture in an organization? Does anyone own the culture?
Well, everyone owns the culture, and it has to be time dedicated by the CEO. There needs to be attention, not just I own culture, but what are you doing this week for culture? Where are you removing obstacles? What initiatives are happening that will move culture forward? But ultimately, it all begins at the top. And whenever there's problems in the culture, you have to go and see where the root causes are. And it's almost always on the executive team. It's something that's going on the executive team that either they're stepping over or that they don't know and they don't know that they don't know it, or that things have gotten out of control. The company's grown too fast or whatever. You never know exactly. But it's the C-suite and it's the CEO.
I would agree with that completely. Now, one of the things that our audience may not be aware of is that you also worked with our organization, my prior company, MTC Performance. And, this was a topic that we worked a lot on. But I always felt, and I hope it showed through to you, I always felt like I did own the culture, and I had to set the tone for the culture in the organization. And if I never did that, to your point, if I did not set the tone, how could I expect everyone else in the organization to buy into the direction that we're trying to go in the organization and the behavioral dynamics that we want to manifest between one another? Those two things are so clearly essential and interwoven, exactly as you described. So anyway, I did my best to do it. In my path, one of the things that I did quite extensively for a period of about 15 years was try to implement the Patrick Lencioni disciplines for obsessions of an extraordinary executive and also 5 temptations of a CEO. And I found that those things were very, very essential. I think they're going to be harmonious with the mantras that you bring to the table in terms of putting an organization in the right posture. But so since we're talking about culture, what is the relationship between culture and success of a company?
Well, you can have a great strategy, but if the strategy is failing or has hiccups or is paused, it's when culture and strategy compete, culture always wins. So it's the strategy that tells you where you want to go, and it's the culture that has it happen. And so if things aren't happening, if people aren't taking ownership, if the ball's not moving down the field, it's a culture issue. If people aren't getting along, if people are not performing, and somebody's not addressing that lack of performance, that's a culture issue. If two people on the executive team can't seem to agree and they can't get out of each other's way to make the strategy happen, that's a culture issue. So culture is the air that moves strategy forward, or culture's the fuel for the strategy.
And that culture can either be functional or dysfunctional, as I think you're indicating. And we see dysfunction manifest in lots of different ways and in lots of different places. And would you say that not only the CEO, but the senior management team of an organization is also the cornerstone of pushing that positive culture down into the organization?
Yeah, George. So so let's back up a little bit. So you said culture can be functional or dysfunctional. So a high performance, intentional, healthy culture that your Patrick Lencioni, my Patrick Lencioni, all of our Patrick Lencioni talks about in his strategy book called The Advantage, which is by far one of the best books. It is far better than Traction, but it really talks about strategic framework and how do you have a smart culture and a healthy culture at the same time? How do you have a smart and a healthy company? Well, there's 4 elements to have a functional culture. First of all, it has to be achievement oriented. It isn't about how hard you work. It's not about how heavy you lift. It's about the results of what you're doing. Achievement, not effort. And this is really confused by a lot of employees. And we, in our Work Liberated podcast, we really appeal to both the corporate side of the business and the employee side of the business. So achievement is not about effort. Achievement is about results. Secondly, it's humanistic. Like, I get that there's people running my business and that people have needs. Some want this and some want that, and everybody listens in a different way. And in order for me to have a humanistic culture, I have to appreciate and understand people learn differently, they hear differently, they lead differently, and we have to understand that. Third is affiliative, which is like what we would call collaborative or innovative. It's people want to work with other people. People want to be in a network. And for those people, I was just listening to a report that the people who have failure in companies, they don't integrate. They don't integrate with the team. They don't make themselves valuable. So it's that affiliation. How can I help you? How can you help me? How can we work together to accomplish the bigger objective? And then finally, it's the self-actualization piece. With so many jobs being available, at least now until the big layoffs start happening, which are coming, we're hearing about them everywhere. And I even know people who are part of laying thousands of people off. Anyhow, the self-actualization is you could have a job and you could work for a paycheck, or you can have a job that you believe you are doing something noble. You believe the company is doing something that matters and that makes a difference and that makes the world a better place. There's a contribution all people want to have. If people on the team feel self-actualized in the organization and working on their projects, they will do better. So we've got high achievement, that's results, not effort. Affiliation, which is the working with other people. humanistic, and then self-actualization. When this is how people feel and this is how results get produced, you have a healthy, functional culture. On the other side of the house, when strategy gets stopped and things don't get initiated, or they stop, or they stall, or there's roadblocks that continually get in the way, that's dysfunctional. And there's two polar opposites of dysfunctional. There is aggressive, defensive, where you better get out of my way because I need things done and you're in the way. And now I'm pushing. And when I'm pushing, what that creates is on the other polar is defensive, passive. So people are protecting themselves. So they're not getting anything done, or they're just working in their own little framework, or they're coloring inside the lines and only doing exactly what they're told to do. Neither of those environments is high achievement because there's way too much drama.
I just, not to throw you off track, but I just want to, share with you, and you probably know many people that have experienced this. I've always considered myself a pretty highly motivated person, and I've run into many people that aren't nearly as motivated as I am. And that's a really frustrating moment when, and not just operating my company, but when I was with Sony, when I was with Apple, when I was with any of those organizations, some people are just shot from guns, and others, are indifferent. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So that's really great, George. I'll never forget, this is early on in our relationship, when you looked at me and you looked at the disc profiles of the people on the team and you looked at the aggressive, movers and shakers, and you said, I want all those people, which is great, except for all those people will kill each other. So almost every company that we go into, the name of my company is Keen Alignment, because the ultimate objective is to have people aligned around the strategy so that they can go fulfill it and the company can be successful. You will, whenever you have human beings, you will have passive and you will have aggressive. And the more passive the passive people are, the more aggressive the aggressive people are. And then what you have is entanglement. And so how you address it is you, first of all, this goes back to my roots, make sure you have the right people in the right jobs. And if they're not, you cannot keep them, especially in an economy that is so up and down, chaotic, crazy. We don't know if we're coming or going. If you got the wrong people in the wrong job, they have to go. We are not in an environment that you can turn a sow's ear into a silk purse. You just can't. If somebody's not right for the job, they're not right.
That's one of those good to great principles. And I don't know why the name is escaping me of the author right now. Jim Collins, right? And right people on the bus, right seat on the bus. Just because you're on the bus, you could be completely in the wrong role.
That's right. And this is happening a lot, especially when somebody cares about the company and they're loyal, but they might be in the wrong job. And then you have all these breakdowns around them. They're not getting work done, or they don't do complete work. So first and foremost, you got to make sure you have the right person in the right job and that they want to be in that job. And then you got to give them training, not a ton of training. This is, again, not the climate for a ton of training, but you've got to make sure they know how to use the technology. You've got to make sure they're willing to use the technology, and you've got to make sure that they know what their job is. And then you got to nip those conflicts of entanglement in the bud fast. And this is another question you asked, but like, how responsible is the executive team? The executive team is very responsible for removing obstacles. If we're doing things the way we've been doing for 10 years and everything's changed, we have to start doing things differently. If people are not allowed and don't have the freedom and empowerment on the front lines to improve their experience of the role, to give the customer a better experience, then you've got an organization that's going to be stuck in entanglement, because I might have a great idea, but I got to go ask John, who has to go ask Bob, who has to go ask Ken. And now we got to go up 3 phases to make one simple improvement on the front lines.
Yeah, and that's either a problem with too much hierarchy or a problem with too much legacy systems. Either way you want to look at it, right?
Both. And they're it's everywhere. And the smarter people you hire, the less propensity they have to put up with BS. They want things done and they want them fast. Even the people, George, who are more methodical and who you might call passive, I might say they're methodical and detailed. They don't want to fail and they don't want to hold the company back. But some people think they have to do exactly what they were told because that's the framework that they come to. But when you find out in this self-actualization process, no, they want to follow a process, but they really want to feel that they have the freedom and the power to contribute wherever they want to contribute so that they feel like they are fully used up in that job. So there's a lot of different reasons for conflicts, and we have to get to the bottom of why it's there.
One of the things I've read recently, I think this came from Guy Kawasaki, is that progressive companies take some of their most talented people and intentionally do not leave them in the same role for any particular length of time, with the idea being that the longer you're in a given role, the more you're accepting of the status quo, the more you're accepting of things that'll never change. And when you move into a new role, you have insights and observations that, to use your word, that can be actualized both in yourself and in the way the organization does things. So that seems like it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's so what happens when I start a new role is all of my neural pathways are getting challenged. So they say, if you want a brain to learn, and I know you've challenged me a little bit on text about the brain doesn't do this or whatever, but if you want to learn something new, you almost have to be shocked into learning something new. It's the same concept. Back when I used to own a staffing firm, they would say, move people's desks, have everybody change desks, have them sit by a new person, because the brain is wired to go with the familiar. And it's the path of least resistance. So when you shock somebody, give them a new job, put them in a new role, give them something new to work on, you actually open up all their brain synapses and everything is clicking. And there's newness. So it's the same concept of, if you want to do something, if you walk down a street and you fall in a hole, well, the next time you got to walk around the hole or walk down a new street so you can learn something new. And that actually, these growth mindset cultures like Microsoft, it's one of their core values. And a lot of people are copying, a lot of companies are copying. If you're truly in a growth mindset, it means you are learning something new quarterly. You're on new projects. Your job is to improve that process. Your job is to streamline. Your job is to come up with something better than we're already doing. And there are people who thrive in growth mindset environments, and there are people who will not thrive in those environments. And those people, I highly recommend that they learn how to learn. Because in the world we're living in, if you're not learning how to learn, you will be learning how to collect unemployment.
That is such a profound statement. And I think you know that I always emphasize continuous learning in my organization. And yet, I'm going to tie this in with one of the questions I have prepared. What is it about people's personalities that organizations are rife with dysfunction, right? Is that a function of people just being people, or is it a function of the organization not managing their way effectively around personality?
Wow, that is a loaded question. So part of it
That's why I get the big bucks.
Part of it is a function of people being people. But if you think about an organism, right? Any organism has, in order for the organism to thrive, the organism has to have an intention. The organism has to have an environment to thrive, and the organism has to have architecture. It's the reason companies have a noble cause. That's their intention. It's the reason you create culture, because the culture is the environment. And it's the reason you have processes and systems. The processes and systems are architecture. Notice I didn't say infrastructure, because infrastructure is almost too much for architecture. So go back to an organism, which I'm now saying is an organization, and all organizations are a human system. All families are a human system. So anytime you have organisms in a system, they will take on the DNA of the system. And if you bring in people to the system who don't fit the system, they will try tooth and nail to have the system fall into who they are, whether they're super aggressive or even passive. A passive person can try to change a culture by slowing things down, by thinking about only their own experience. An aggressive person can change a culture by causing a lot of conflict and dysfunction wherever they go, or they can reach out to attack before ever getting curious. So any organization is a human system, and the human system operates in the environment by whatever that human system gets away with. So it's yes, and you've got people who bring in all their familia issues. Every single human being that's ever had a parent or a first boss is transferring their caca relationships that they've had in the past on their new boss. Welcome to heaven. It's called transference. It used to only be labeled during sessions with a therapist, but it happens. If you're a passive little girl and your parents tell you to do this and do that, you're going to come to work and wait to be told. If you're an aggressive young man and nobody ever had to tell you to do anything, you're going to do the same thing at work. And to the degree that you're allowed to be you will be the places you stay if you do not have a growth mindset. If that passive little girl says, life isn't working for me, it's not happening the way I want it to, she has to choose not to be passive anymore. Then she can go work for an organization that is moving and shaking things. So the boss's job is to notice, take the pulse on culture. And I'm not talking about paying 20 grand and doing a survey. You don't have to do a survey. You can walk around and you can look and smell and taste everything that survey would give you. But if you do pay 20 grand for a survey, you better do something about what you get out of that survey. So
before we go into that, you're triggering multiple thoughts here, and I'm going to take you on a couple of hard left or hard right turns, and we'll come back to the survey. First, I noticed in the last year, it seems to me you've run at least one, if not more than one, workshop focused on women, executive females. So why is that a focus for you? I think it probably relates to at least to some extent to what you just said. Why don't you just tell us about your mission, your own mission to help female executives?
Yeah, so the programs that we run are called Ignite Your Power, and it's for women executives and women who aspire to be executives. So everybody in the room has a management level role depending on the level. So why we first started this is we had a couple years deeply entrenched with manufacturing companies. And what we noticed at the manufacturing organizations is less than 2 women in leadership. Like even in a room of 30 people, less than 2 women. And then that happened in tech. And then that happened in finance. And what these people in these trainings would stay, because we do on-sites that's called Deep Alignment and Compelling Future. It's really where we create the foundation for their organizational culture. And what would come out of that is, what are some organizational strengths we're not leveraging the women in the organizations? So instead of them having women's leadership programs, the clients asked Keen Alignment to create it. So we did, and we just did our 5th one. We do 1 or 2 a year. And ultimately what we get, George, is a lot of women, no matter what level they're at, including executive board members of some of the largest consulting companies in the world. The women have this sense that is different than men, and that's that I have to wait and see. Now, if you watch Yellowstone, this is not the daughter from Yellowstone, because she is not that kind of person, but the majority of women in leadership are second guessing themselves. They're not taking the same risks that men are taking in business. They accept less for themselves than their counterparts would. There was a study done that if a man sees an ad for a job online or wherever, the man will apply for the job even if he only has 20% qualifications, and he'll figure he'll learn the rest. The woman needs 80% of the qualifications to apply for that job. So the whole mindset of I have to wait for permission, or I want to make sure it's right before I do it, that is what we are working on breaking through in these Ignite Power workshops. And then there's also the whole work-life navigation. How do I have kids and be a decent mom and have a career? Or how do I start my own business because I can't go where I want to go in these companies? But I have to be honest, the work that we're doing in Ignite Your Power is the same work that we're doing in Deep Alignment in co-ed. But when you're with the women, we're focused on women only for 2.5 days. And with Deep Alignment, we're focused on everybody on the executive team, which the majority to this day still are men.
I think, again, referring backwards to my organization at the time, I had about a 50% of the managers in my company were women. And I was very positive and I think proactive about assisting women to take on more responsibility, become more senior in the organization. And I was always very complimentary to the women that did that, and very happy to see it. So at least for me, I saw their potential and I saw their intelligence and I saw their initiative, and I wanted to encourage them. Now, to your point, though, there is either I'm not looking for an argument here. There's either a biological or a cultural bias to not be as assertive as men for whatever reason. So the men will typically just bombastically and loudly, like I'm talking right now, interject their thinking into a meeting. And there are not, someone like yourself, you're very confident, you're very self-assured. And so you get into that environment and you go toe to toe with any man that's in the room. Not all women are ready or willing to do that. And why not?
Yeah, and I do think it's enculturation. I also think there hasn't been very many good female role models in business. I mean, if I'm in a room with women and we say, well, who are your role models growing up in business? They use TV personalities like Mary Tyler Moore. Now our girls, my granddaughter and the young girls, they have tons of role models right now. But if you're in your 40s, 50s, even mid 30s, there just hasn't been a enculturation of women lead companies and women lead countries. Not in the United States. There are other countries that have had way more women in senior leadership roles. And it is not an argument, but honestly, it's a reprogramming, like we talked about in the neural pathways. It's a reprogramming of who am I and what am I capable of and what do I want? And, I also read an article that most of the people that are Black that are achieving status in financial or in position are doing it for themselves. And I think we're seeing the same thing with women. If women cannot make it in the corporate world, then they'll triple their income working for themselves. And so George, you're progressive. You also were in Vistage or tech for a number of years. You're a growth mindset guy. You're an innovator. You read every book there is. So you're a sponge. But the average CEO, honestly, is trying to meet their numbers, and they're not necessarily focused on the human side of the business, which is changing.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we did that hard left turn, I'm going to go on a hard right turn, because you also triggered me to think of another thing. When you made the comment that all organizations are made up of people, one way or the other. And unfortunately, I would say that's less true today than it was some years ago. And I'm going to give you an example. I cannot, and this is probably going to resonate with you. I think it will resonate with everyone. How many times do you call a company's customer service group and you're going to go to the Philippines, or you're going to go to some offshore call center? And I love the Philippine people. I have nothing against the Philippine people. You hear the chickens outside, and the pigs in the backyard while they're talking to you, and then they all have scripts, and their scripts are designed to be as pleasant as possible, but they're not designed to actually meet the needs of the customer. And I find that incredibly frustrating. Because of the internet, many companies have become ever more impersonal and divorced their delivery from human interaction, very much on purpose. And I don't know about you, I find that just horrible and frustrating, and working completely against the needs of customers.
Well, that is a loaded statement, George. So first of all, if I'm calling the Philippines, they're still people, they're still human beings. And for whatever reason, the organization has decided they want to outsource. Now, I will tell you that I've had two people outsourced from the same outsourced outfit for airlines, and one does whatever that they need to make sure I'm taken care of, and the other follows the script. So I think wherever you go in any country, any outsourcing, you're still going to get the dynamic of who is intrinsically motivated to do that work and who's looking for the $6 an hour to make their paycheck. And so that's all I can answer for. And I think
that's fine. I wasn't
talking about really big companies, and the kind of companies I serve, my company serves, is 20 million to 600 million. And I don't care if they use artificial intelligence or if they outsource. Fundamentally, it's still an organization based up of people. Now, if they don't care about people, they would never be a client for Keen Alignment. And there are many, Jeff Bezos, even though he's no longer the CEO of Amazon, came out multiple times and said, I don't care about culture. It is not on my radar. It will never be on my radar. The only thing on my radar is to be the low-cost provider. At least he was honest about it.
Right.
There's a lot of people who are not honest about it. All they want to do is grow and sell, and they don't give a rat's butt what happens to anybody else.
Yeah.
And those are just not companies that care about culture.
Makes
but
sense.
Wouldn't you want to know that before you applied?
Absolutely. But just to be super clear for you and everyone else that's going to watch this podcast, this was not designed to be a slam on Philippines at all. This was designed to be a slam on management. And it's whoever it is here in the United States or Europe or wherever the company is being managed from, whoever designs systems to insulate the decision makers from the front line, I have no respect for that. Yeah.
Great. So George, that's the opposite of self-actualization. That's architecture is, here's our mission. It's Lencioni's disciplines, right? Here's our mission. Here's our vision. Here's our values. And here's the framework we make decisions. Actually, it's from his book, The Advantage. Here's our strategic framework. Make decisions from here. The problem is when you outsource because you want to pay almost no money to get something done, you're going to get what you pay for. And like a very good friend of mine, and I train the recruiters, they're all in the Philippines. They operate the exact same way as the recruiters from San Jose operate. But there's other companies like Alaska Airlines that in order to keep their airplanes running, they don't care. And they would rather give you a discount to plug in a number and work via text. Now the airlines, if I would be willing, which I'm not, want me to text somebody if my flight gets canceled. Who's going to do that? Who's an executive who has to go somewhere? But it's that decision is made way up here that this is not a priority. Get their money on the front end. If there's a problem, they can deal with it after the fact. But just like we saw in our entire career, things go overseas, they come back. Things get outsourced, they come back. We use technology, they come back. So it just depends on who the company is and how important the customer experience is.
Thank you. So let's get back on track with the, you were going in the direction of mission, vision, values. Let's talk about that for a few minutes.
Okay.
So how important is that? You know, Lencioni would say clarity is number one, actually, is a cohesive management team. But right after that is clarity. So how, in your view, how do those three things play together? Mission, vision, values.
Yeah. So if culture is important, if contribution is important, that's my caveat. If the company wants to make a positive impact and you have to have people on the team in order to do it, then I think mission, vision, values are imperative. It's the architecture that creates the environment, and the environment is how people speak to each other, how they interact with each other, how they get problems solved, how they execute work. So it's the framework for how we get together and work and deliver. It's imperative if you're going to follow it. Now,
you're talking about the values now.
I'm talking about all of it. I've worked with companies who had a value of integrity, but they had no problem lying to each other on the executive team. They didn't consider that integrity had to do with when you said you're going to get something done and you actually really do it. So they had no relationship between integrity and their word. And then they would say that they didn't. No, I never promised to do that. I said I would look into it. And so whether it's a value or let's say your mission, like our mission is to partner with organizations to shape intentional, healthy, and high performance organizational culture. If I've got someone on my team who's not operating intentionally, is definitely not high performance, and who's not healthy and interacting with other people, if I allow that person to stay on the team and I don't put that person on a performance improvement program, or I don't tighten up or give any coaching or counsel, then my mission is not real. Because whatever my mission is for you, my customer, my mission has to be for me too. So it just depends on if it's important or not really to the company. If it is, then it's imperative.
Believe it or not, I've always been confused about the difference between mission and vision. And I think you have a clear idea that there's a difference. You want to explain
Well, it's
that?
interesting because Satya Nadella, who wrote the book Hit Refresh and completely turned Microsoft around, does not believe there's a difference between mission and vision. So in my world, our vision is to forever liberate the human spirit at work. Forever liberate the human spirit at work. It's a someday it could happen, but it's bigger than I could possibly do myself. It's what we're working towards. The mission is who we are right now and how we get our work done. But yeah, we cover this for a day and a half inside our Compelling Future workshop. And there are clients who do not create a vision. They create a mission and it covers both. Microsoft is one of those companies, but they weren't a client.
Moving forward, you also talk about an emergent culture, which I find to be an interesting term. It sort of implies that an emergent culture is an emerging culture out of some sort of work you're doing. Is that
Yeah.
fair?
So yes, and it's not just work we're doing. So I have a video, but I can't show it right now because it'll take too long to get it queued up. But if you Google Emergent on YouTube, you'll see like a flock of birds. You ever see a flock of birds, like all of them going this way and then all of them going that way and then all of them going this way? That's the dynamic of Emergent, or a school of fish. There is no one leader saying about face. The school of fish is swimming and then they all together at the exact time turn. And so it's a dynamic, it's an energy. Culture is energy. And if you can create a culture where people are solving their own problems, where people are intrinsically committed to serving, they will come up with their own solutions. They won't need to be told. But it isn't just we're emergent, so go. I mean, I've had clients that said, we're empowering, so everyone's empowered, but they weren't really empowered because they didn't have the authority to be empowered, or they didn't have the tools to be empowered, or they didn't have the information to be empowered. But emergent culture is at this state of inception of innovation. It's like innovation is around every corner. It is changing and growing and shifting as the environment outside shifts. I mean, boy, in the last 3 weeks, we're inundated with gun violence, right? In an emergent culture, it's this whole active shooter. People are being trained for active shooter, and now they're all getting retrained. A company that is not emergent looks at that as a fear-based thing. Oh my God, we have to do this so nobody gets killed here. A company that's emergent looks at this and says, well, the environment around us is changing. We need to be agile enough to change with it. And we're going to give our managers training on how to see if and how to tell if somebody's got mental illness on our payroll. I mean, there are people in every company that are suffering a great deal with depression and even psychosis, and nobody knows how to identify that. Oh, we have employee assistants, go call them. But you're going to see more and more people in organizations and part of management training to be about mental health. Anyway, so it's emergent, just like a software. If you had where you were getting a lot of different people as opinions, what do you call that? Crowdsourcing. Emergent is about people sourcing the culture, not being told to be this way, but the people source it.
Got it.
Energy.
So let's say your company has a lot of dysfunction. What exactly, how would you guide them to pivot from where they're at as effectively as possible? And how long is it going to take, by the way?
It depends on how big the company is. We had a company that was 800 million, very dysfunctional leader, very short-sighted, immature, pounding the desk to get things done. He called me and said, I'm new here. I've made about every mistake I could make. If I don't get my act together, I'll be fired. That took 3.5 years, and he went kicking and screaming, even though he hired us, because fundamentally the person who had to change was him. This guy cut overtime for everybody within 2 months of starting a new job, never even looked to see what the systemic impacts of cutting overtime would be. He just wanted to be more profitable. And in the end, he wasn't more profitable. There could be a $10 million company or even a $5 million company that I know, and that's a startup, and they've done some things wrong that they need to now backtrack on. That company, if they invest in doing a deep alignment workshop, which is really about looking at who are we and what are we about and telling the truth about what's in the way, what behaviors are in the way, what philosophies are in the way, what processes are in the way, what people are in the way. And then compelling future, which is where you really create the future. That's more of the Lencioni work that we do. I am a trainer of theirs, so I follow their recipes for how to do things, starting with the 5 dysfunctions and then all the way up to the advantage. So that company, 18 months, but it's something that the leadership team has to put a stake in the ground and say, the way we're going is not working. We need to stop. We need to adjust, and we need to move forward.
I remember,
that takes courage.
I don't know if you remember, I think you will, but you ran a workshop for our management group one time. And I'm pretty sure it was you, where we had to tell, something very personal and intimate, among the management team. I think one was positive and maybe one was negative, but I remember the experience of going through that level of openness and honesty with one another is very cathartic. And hopefully you come out of an exercise like that healthier and energized. Some people crumble under an exercise like that.
Well, it's interesting, George. So first of all, it's 2.5 days, and it's in a very safe space, and people are prepped to go into it. So we'll do a leadership assessment. They'll have a debrief with a coach. They'll get really clear on what's in their own way and what's in the team's way. So by the time they come in the room, they know what's happening. But we promise in writing and have a money back guarantee, the team will be in a much better place. There's the facilitation. It's 25 years of training in facilitation. It's not like any Jim or Joe or Susie or Mary can lead those things. It's a very, very high level. It's challenging for people, but they're free because all the stuff that they've been holding on to that doesn't work, okay? All the complaints about this company, all the strangleholds or the chokeholds, all of the constraints, it all comes out. It turns into an artifact. It has a date by when it's going to get fixed, and everybody's on the same page. That's why we call it deep alignment. I will tell you that I've had certain clients who I've been coaching for 3 years who are scared to death to do that meeting. I'm still coaching them, but they're scared to death because they actually don't want to deal with the constraints. They're more comfortable. So there's a word that you will like, a phrase called cordial hypocrisy. It's a great book on building trust by Fernando Flores and Robert Solomon, I believe is the other guy's name. But the companies that are executive teams that are more comfortable with cordial hypocrisy will not do a deep alignment, because the deep alignment will blow up that cordial hypocrisy, because we go into what is trust. And trust is not looking at your face saying everything is great. And then when I walk out of the room, I talk to my 3 other executives and say another shit show meeting. That's cordial hypocrisy.
I would say, again, speaking for myself, that as a CEO, one of the most valuable traits that I learned, and I'm not sure exactly when I learned it, I would say maybe I learned it somewhere between 2010 and 2015, was the ability to address every difficult issue, either in a group or one-on-one. And there's such a skill involved and courage. I guess courage is the number one thing of all. You have to have a tremendous amount of courage to call one of your direct reports, a VP or a director in a small company, and have a very open and direct conversation, not to humiliate them, but to let them know they are out of alignment with the culture of the organization and it needs to change. It is, but if you have the courage and discipline to do it, it is a profound change
It
over
is.
outcomes.
And it's funny that it's not funny that you bring this up, but this is what we do in our executive coaching program. It really is about, so there's 5 dimensions of leadership, and the center of it is the leader from within. If I am not confident, if I am not clear, if I am not comfortable in my own skin with my role, I won't say what needs to be said. And then there's leading from the front, saying, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. This is how we do it. And then there's leading from the side, which is partnering with that person and saying, hey, I'm noticing, or it's apparent, your behavior is out of alignment. And then there's leading from behind, which is getting out of the center light and supporting someone else. That's true empowerment, supporting someone else to make decisions. And then there's leading from the field, which is tapping into insight and intuition, which is then where innovation comes from. So a big piece of being comfortable in the uncomfortable is in building the muscles of those disciplines of what it takes to be a CEO. I'm also reading a book, Peak. And, who knows what peak is going to be about, peak performance, you could make up a lot. But it turns up that one of the keys for highly successful people is discipline. And it's the discipline to get up and do it even when you don't want to. The discipline to have that radically candid conversation with somebody that this doesn't seem like it's working out, or I want it to work out. I'm willing to work with you, but do you really want it to work out? Because sometimes people don't. And especially, I think we're at the tail end of the Great Resignation, because the Great Resignation is going to be met with the great layoffs. And I think people in the past, a year ago, a year and a half ago, oh, I'm really tired, I'm burnt out, I don't want to deal with this stuff anymore. A lot of people would rather just leave than have to get better.
Right. But the cordial hypocrisy, I think, is the order of the day in most places. And when you move from an environment where that's been true your entire career, no matter which company, it's that, very few managers are as direct and clear as they need to be. And so your bad habits have gone with you everywhere. Your selfishness, those personality traits that are inherently so limiting, they're embedded in you, and now someone's going to call you on it. And so that could become very uncomfortable. And as we probably read somewhere or another, people will exit themselves if you make it uncomfortable enough with truth, not with humiliation, not with degradation, but just with truth. This needs to change. Here's what has to happen. And
perfect.
And the date it has to happen is within the next 90 days. And if you don't get it done in the next 90 days, it's been nice knowing you, but I want you to know today that is what has to happen.
Yeah. So there's so much you just said. So the power is in freedom to choose. They want me to be operating at this level. All I can possibly do is give the best I can, and my best is here. Oops, there's a gap. I'm unwilling to change. I am unwilling to take myself on. So there's real power in having people resign. Bye.
Yeah.
There's power, because when it's the wrong person, they will hold the whole company back. And what I said earlier that managers need to get some training in mental health and how to identify that. But we also have to teach new people when they come on board, what does it mean to be part of a high performance organization? What is the DNA of being in a high performance organization? We should be doing that during the interview process. Vivian and I, who's sitting right next to me, we are working with a company. We did a compelling future with them. They're a women's clothing manufacturer. You find their clothes in places like REI. Well, we did a 2.5-day workshop with their executive team about 3 months ago. It was extraordinary. Now they've called back and they said, okay, you said you could help us hire the right people for this culture. We thought we could do it on our own, but we're having some mistakes. We're having some performance issues, and the performance issues are not just about people not achieving their goal or their metric. It's all the systemic drama, conflict, entanglement when there's performance issues, right? Because there's hurt feelings or there's arguments. So if we could just tell people before they come in, here's our bar, these are the behaviors. And you know what? If you don't operate with these behaviors, it's probably going to be short-lived. It'll be like a temp job for you.
Right.
We're not doing a good enough job of telling people what it's going to take to succeed in our company, and what we require in terms of performance. And even when you do tell them, people only listen with the listening that's available for them and the level of consciousness they're in that moment. Because sometimes people hear what they want to hear.
Hiring is a whole other topic, and we're going to leave that for another day. And, you know, Margaret, we're coming up on an hour right now, so I think it's probably a good time to wrap in respect of your time. And I've got something else going on right now as well. But I sure appreciate you taking this hour to spend with me. I think it's been a very engaging discussion, and I'm sure that anyone that has the opportunity to listen to this will enjoy what they learn. So what I'd like to offer you at this moment is the opportunity to tell everyone how to get in touch with Margaret Graziano and Keen Alignment, and maybe a phone number, maybe whatever method you'd like to be contacted.
Okay, so it's Keen Alignment, KEENALIGNMENT.com. Hindsight, maybe it's a long name. Our website, reach us there. And I'm Margaret Graziano on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Very nice. And I, for those that don't know, I'm George Kriza, Kriza, CEO of Challenging Decisions, a decision support consulting firm to assist management to achieve their highest level of performance possible. So you can get to me at 312-320-7760 or diamond1@challengingdecisions.com. You can book an appointment with me at Calendly with challengingdecisions.com at the end. So thank you again, Margaret.